Good morning, everyone. Lots happening around the world, and Justin Trudeau is demonstrating just how out of touch he is by tweeting this last night at 7:24 p.m. He says, "You're already at home tonight, so why not unplug for hashtag Earth Hour at 8:30 p.m. local time? Whatever you do tonight, stay home and stay safe." And an hour before Earth Hour, I don't know. The responses are kind of fun to walk through. I'll skip them because there's a lot to get to today. Here's an eyebrow-raising story. Quebec police set up at Ontario-Quebec border in Témiscamingue, and the Quebec OPP, essentially, the Quebec version of that, the Quebec provincial police, are enforcing a Quebec border. And here's the Toronto Star talking about it. Quebec to add checkpoints forbid non-essential travel to 8 regions. The Quebec government is moving to protect some of the province's more remote regions from the spread of COVID-19 by setting up checkpoints to block non-essential travel. Deputy Premier Genevieve Guilbeault, sorry if I've got that wrong, announced the measure Saturday as health officials reported nearly 2,500 people in the province had tested positive for the disease. She said police checkpoints would be established on major roads in and out of those areas as of Saturday afternoon. Quebec health authorities say there are now 2,498 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the province, and 4 additional deaths were reported Saturday, bringing the total to 22 deaths. Public health order applies primarily to eastern and northern Quebec. Guilbeault told the Daily Briefing in Quebec City that the population in those areas are deemed to be more at risk of COVID-19. She said if people attempting to enter or leave the regions, quote, are not an essential service, if they're not going for health reasons or for humanitarian reasons, they'll be sent home. Quebec provincial police have also set up checkpoints near the Canada-US border to intercept snowbirds coming back to Quebec to ensure that they understand that there's a 14-day quarantine in place. The province has identified parts of Montreal and the Eastern Township as being hotspots for the spread of the virus, with Montreal declaring a health emergency on Friday afternoon at the behest of provincial health authorities. I found that weird, right? So Montreal didn't declare it themselves. They were urged to do it by provincial authorities. Okay, weird, right? I've long said that the Trudeau government has mishandled this from the beginning. Miss Haydu, Miss Tam, Trudeau himself, etc. We didn't have to be in a situation where lockdown was the only choice. We didn't have to do that. And I know that because there is a country, and it's Taiwan, that isn't living like we're living right now. This is from yesterday, and we're going to get to that. It says how the article's title is, it's from the Edmonton Journal, how Taiwan, unlike Canada, keeps schools and businesses open during COVID-19 outbreak. My goodness, competent leadership is possible? Competent leadership in the face of the outbreak and having an open commerce and open running school system, which is important to modern everyday life, modern supply chains, etc. All of that works. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And here's how we missed that. Okay, so this is an interesting read to me. It's long, and I apologize. And Miss Rempel responded to this, and I'm blocked by Miss Rempel, so I had to take a picture. But Miss Rempel responded to this, and she says, unfortunately, what's done is done. Recognizing what went wrong needs to be acknowledged as we correct course for the future. Here are some thoughts on how we can move forward. It's weird, and so she's linking to the article that I'm going to read through, okay? And it's really weird when you look at the early calls from the Conservatives to think that she's on the same team as them. And again, I think the Conservatives are another side of the Liberal coin. I don't necessarily think that this would be as mismanaged, but I think that there's a lot of similarities between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. But anyway, they do call, and there's proof in this, and we're going to look at it, they do call early for stopping flights and to mimic what seemed to be working in other countries, and they were stopped at every turn by Miss Haydu and Miss Tan. So here it is, Edmonton Journal, the road to Canada's COVID-19 outbreak, timeline of federal government failure at border to slow the virus. Okay, and I'm just going to start down here. This is Dr. Lee. If you don't know who Dr. Lee is, he's the first, Lee Win Lang, he's the first doctor to sound the alarm, and this was the first indication anybody had that there was a bigger problem coming out of China, and this was December 30th, 2019, okay? And fast forward to January 22nd. January 22nd is when Canada first implements screening requirements related to COVID-19 for travelers returning from China to major airports in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Passengers with symptoms are to be alerted that they should go into voluntary isolation for 14 days, with voluntary self-isolation essentially being the Canadian policy for the next 2 months. And then we scroll down, January 25th, Canada confirms its first case of COVID-19 related to travel in Wuhan, China. And I found this interesting at the time because if it's part of the plan, right, if it was expected to happen, and the Joker makes this point in The Dark Knight, in 2008's Dark Knight, which is a good movie if you haven't seen it. He makes the point, if it's part of the plan, even if the plan's horrific, right? If it's part of the plan, people will go with it. It's like, oh, well, it was going to happen anyway. Old people die, right? Oh, man, old. You had a good life, though, right? I've heard elderly people say this. I'm like, you're in the demographic that you're talking about, right? And the person who said it was like, oh, well, I'm pretty strong, blah, blah. And you never think it's you, right? Like, I think that it's so maddening to, if it's part of the plan, to just witness that in real time and like watch it being kind of used to exploit people's apathy and people's normalcy bias. They didn't want to believe this could happen. They didn't want to believe it could happen in Canada. Most people thought it was going to be like SARS. Oh, it'll be stuck in Toronto. Nobody's going to hear about it, right? And all of a sudden cases started popping up everywhere, right? So, and less of a spread in places like Saskatchewan and Northwest Territories, but or none of it, and more in Toronto, right? Shocker, but density plays a role in the spread of virus, right? Here's January 25th. Federal Liberal Health Minister Patty Haydu says of Canada's border controls, measures to mitigate the risk of introduction and spread of the disease like the new coronavirus in Canada are in place, including messaging on arrival screens at Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver international airports, reminding travelers to inform a border services officer if they're experiencing flu-like symptoms, and an additional health screening question on electronic kiosks used by international travelers. So again, they're saying, no, there's lots being done, everything's okay. January 26th, China restricts all non-essential travel to and from Wuhan, essentially putting 50 million people into quarantine. Canada advises against non-essential travel to Wuhan. So if you have to go, okay, but if not, don't go. January 27th, Edmonton MP Matt Gerino, sorry if I got that wrong, asks the first question in the House of Commons about COVID-19 after a second case was reported in Canada. How can Canadians be assured that this spread is being properly contained? The risk to Canadians remains low. Our systems continue to work extremely closely together, Haydee replies. January 27th, Conservative MP Todd Doherty, sorry if I got that wrong, asks Haydee, quote, every day thousands of passengers from China and elsewhere in Asia arrive at our ports of entry, Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. Oftentimes they board domestic flights and connect through Canada and elsewhere in North America. Calling the coronavirus a grave situation, China has quarantined whole cities and millions of people. The WHO has now listed the global threat as high. The safety of Canadians is currently dependent upon screening in China and self-reporting by infected passengers. When will the government institute a real plan that includes an enhanced screening process? Haydee replied, in fact, our government has been well ahead of the World Health Organization's strategies in terms of screening at ports of entry. We have multiple measures to alert travelers from the affected regions about what to do if they suspect that they have an illness, or that they have the illness. We have trained our CBSA, Canadian Border Service Agents, officers to ensure that they have the tools they need to support people who may be ill. We have worked with partner airlines to ensure their information on flights. I just want to point this out here. Here's the March 22nd report. Scary as hell, Canadians describe scenes of lax screening at Pearson Airport. Okay, and I've done this already. I've talked about this many times. This was the activist, right? Yeah, right. Citizen. Sure. And here's another one. How sick Canadian travelers are masking COVID-19 symptoms to get through airport screening. This is from March 25th. People are still doing this, right? Canadians desperate to return home from abroad in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic are easily circumventing air travel screenings aimed at preventing sick and infected passengers from boarding planes, CBC News has found. Some are simply hiding symptoms from officials to ensure they can get back home. So it's very interesting. when you watch the rates, right? Like, when you go back to the beginning of March, the rates are relatively small. Cases are 34, new cases 1, 14, 6, right? All of this stuff is very minor jumps, but that's what exponential growth looks like, right? And we're slowing our growth curve by quite a lot, so that's a good thing. But at the same time, it didn't have to come to this. It didn't have to get this way had we acted early, right? Had we stopped the flights. And it's not like China's not stopping the flights, right? Here's a report from the New York Times. This is from March 26th. This is March 29th. To slow virus, China bars entry by almost all foreigners, right? Worried that international travelers might trigger a second wave of coronavirus infections, China announced late Thursday night that it was suspending practically all entry to the country by foreigners and was halting almost all international passenger flights as well. Oh, I thought that's racist. Isn't that racist? That's not racist anymore because China's doing it? Oh, okay. Weird, right? Weird. January 27th, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer asks, will the Prime Minister support observer status in the World Health Organization for Taiwan? Ooh, this is an interesting question, right? This is an interesting question. Here is a very interesting little interview with a WHO leader, and this is Ezra Levent's tweet about this. It says, when you understand the WHO is controlled by communist China, their bizarre misconduct, disinformation, and unscientific advice finally make sense. It says, will the WHO, well, I'll let you listen to the whole thing. Here it goes.
Taiwan's membership. Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
Right, because I'm actually curious on talking about Taiwan as well, on Taiwan's case.
We decided to give Dr. Alward another call to follow up.
And I just want to see if you can comment a bit on how Taiwan has done so far in terms of containing the virus.
Well, we've already talked about China, and when you look across all the different areas of China, they've actually all done quite a good job. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for inviting us to participate, and good luck as you go forward with the battle in Hong Kong.
Would the WHO consider Taiwan's membership? Hello?
I just wanted to give you the beginning again, just because it kind of cut in. So will the WHO reconsider Taiwan's membership? Interesting stuff, right? So he's kind of played dumb. And here's a tweet talking about how well Taiwan's done. Here's Harry Chen, PhD, and I don't know this guy's credentials, but he says he's a renegade China journalist from the underground Silk Road communique. Okay, so I don't know how legitimate this is, but there is an Edmonton Journal follow-up. So here we go. He says, a lot of people don't know just how well Taiwan did. In fact, they did the best in the whole world. WHO and China want to cover it up because it legitimizes Taiwan's sovereignty. More proof that the WHO is on communist payroll. And here's the Edmonton Journal article, How Taiwan, unlike Canada, keeps schools and businesses open during COVID-19 outbreak. And I'm going to cut just to the meat of it. It says, how did Taiwan get this so right and Canada get so wrong? From the start, Taiwanese political and medical authorities didn't trust China that the disease was unlikely to spread from human to human. They instituted a public health campaign, and there's a link to that, with comprehensive travel bans, quarantines, and sanitary measures such as the widespread use of face masks. So yes. And here is Canada, March 22nd. Scary as hell, Canadians describe scenes of lax screening at Pearson Airport. You see how doing nothing and making a situation where people can mask their symptoms is leading to the continued increase in our numbers and the continued prolonging of our lockdown measures, right? And this is, again, back in January, we could have done something about this then. We could have instituted the same type of measures that Taiwan instituted with possibly the same success. And had we acted in January, that would have been before Justin Trudeau had sent the emergency stockpile of 16,000 tons of masks to China. And I'm just going to talk about this now because it seems like a good segue, but here's China supplied, here's National Review reporting, China supplied faulty coronavirus test kits to Spain, right? 80% of the 150 portable quick coronavirus test kits delivered to the Czech Republic earlier this month were faulty, according to local Czech news site expats.cz. So the tests produce results in 10 or 15 minutes, but are usually less accurate than other tests, right? So faulty tests. Here's another one. 600,000 Chinese FFP2 masks the Netherlands have distributed to the hospitals do not work. They're now recalled because they're most likely already in use. Dutch public news organization NOS reports. Here it is. The Netherlands has actually ordered 1.3 million Chinese masks and half were useless. Several doctors closely involved in fighting the coronavirus outbreak are concerned about the spread of unsafe protective equipment across the country. Here's another one. Here's our foreign affairs minister tweeting, "Thank you for this donation in the face of the global pandemic. Supporting each other is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do." And here's the tweet that he's retweeting. On March 27th, Bank of China donates medical supplies, including 30,000 masks, 10,000 sets of protective clothing, 10,000 goggles, 50,000 pairs of gloves, followed by N95 medical masks to Canada fighting against COVID-19. We are together. And I mean, hopefully it all works. Hopefully it's not a quagmire, right? And, yet we're still landing flights from China. We're still landing them. It's so crazy. Okay, so back to January 27th. This is in response to the Prime Minister support observer status in the WHO for Taiwan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's answer on the 27th was, "We continue to work with the WHO. We continue to work with allied countries around the world to ensure that we are dealing with this health challenge." But a day later, Trudeau adds, "As we did during the time of SARS virus, we support Taiwan's meaningful participation in international multilateral forums, especially when its presence provides important contributions to the global public good. We believe that Taiwan's role as an observer in the World Health Organization, assembly meetings, is in the best interest of the international health community." And there's more. Here's more MPs talking about this. MP Gerino continues to press the House of Commons with three cases now in Canada. Other nations are stopping flights in and out of China and introducing more rigorous screening process. Is the Prime Minister satisfied with the actions of his government? Trudeau replies, "I can reassure Canadians that the health risk to Canadians continues to be low. We're taking all necessary precautions to prevent the spread of infection. Preventative measures are in place in airports in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal." Nope. Back to this. A doctor from Thunder Bay, this is January 29th, Liberal MP Marcus Pawlowski, excuse me if I've got that wrong, a doctor from Thunder Bay questions Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, at the Parliamentary Hearing Committee. The BBC was reporting today that the Ministry of Health was asking all people coming from China to voluntarily self-isolate for 2 weeks upon returning to the country. I think because the idea is that it got out of Wuhan. When you look at the numbers and what's happening in China, it's not isolated to Wuhan. It would seem to me to be a fairly feasible thing for us to do and a precautionary thing to have anyone coming from China self-isolate for 2 weeks. Have you considered making a recommendation potentially under the Quarantine Act? I don't know if there's a means to enforce that. The Quarantine Act was brought into play this past week. This was January 29th, okay? Right? You understand how much inaction has cost us? Our government did nothing, and not necessarily using the Quarantine Act then, but maybe acting on passengers coming in. Had they done that, perhaps we wouldn't have had to close the whole country, all of our commerce, right? Perhaps we could still be going to work, our kids could still be going to school. But the inaction of this government on the health advice of Dr. Tam and Ms. Haydu has directly led to this. Make no mistake. I'm going to leave it here. There's so much more. Like, this is a 45-minute read, and I highly recommend reading it. But goodness, I'm already at 18 minutes, and I mean, I could just keep going. This would be an hour and a half long show if I got through this. Maybe I'll do a live stream one day, and we'll just talk about this. Just as people come on, I'll just start doing another one when I get bored. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands.